When was the last time you posted something online and just kept checking for likes and comments? You know, that moment refreshing your phone, feeling that little dopamine hit when notifications come in and that subtle disappointment when they don't. Think about how many times you've shaped what you say, how you look, or what you create based on what you think will get the most reaction instead of what actually feels right for you, what actually feels real for you. This validation addiction isn't just annoying, it's spiritual poison. It's that thing that takes you from expressing your authentic truth to performing for the audience, from creating what matters to manufacturing what gets attention. When you look at Kanye West's journey from groundbreaking artist who changed the sound of hip hop to someone who seems to chase controversy just to stay relevant, you're witnessing something that might be happening in your own life right now. How the pursuit of public validation can slowly disconnect you from the authentic self that real fulfillment requires. This isn't just about some celebrity, it's about you. If you think about your own relationship with validation, have you noticed how that need for likes, views, and comments starts shaping what you share? Have you felt that emptiness that comes after getting all the validation for something that just wasn't even your full truth? Today, I'm going to break down how the validation trap isn't just about social media. It's about a spiritual dependency that might be corrupting your authentic expression. And more importantly, how recognizing this pattern can free you from that endless cycle of seeking others' approval to feel worthy. The validation addiction. So let's explore three powerful truths about the validation trap that could completely transform how you express yourself in the world. First, you need to understand that chasing public validation creates an addiction that slowly disconnects you from your authentic self. So when Kanye first burst onto the scene, he challenged every industry norm, from his production style to his willingness to speak uncomfortable truths about everything from materialism to racism. But over time, we've watched his need for attention and validation grow to the point where it seems like he'll say anything or do almost anything to stay in the spotlight. In his own lyrics, Kanye's been surprisingly self-aware about this trap. In I'm a God, he's simultaneously claiming divine status while revealing the spiritual prison that comes with validation addiction. It's like he's documenting his own disconnection from authentic self in real time. So just take a moment right now to think about where validation seeking shows up in your life. Maybe it's crafting social media posts for maximum likes. Maybe it's saying things you don't fully believe because you know they'll get a reaction. Maybe it's holding back your real thoughts because they won't be popular. Can you feel that subtle pull towards shaping yourself for others' approval? That feeling isn't random, it's your spirit recognizing that you're disconnecting from your authentic truth for the temporary validation hit. So ask yourself, how much of what I express is shaped by how I think others will react rather than what feels genuinely true to me? Where am I performing instead of being real? The spiritual cost of this validation addiction is massive because every time you shape your expression for validation rather than truth, you're essentially saying, my authentic self isn't enough. I need to create a version that gets approval, and this creates what spiritual traditions call soul fragmentation, the gradual disconnection from your authentic essence. Kanye's journey shows this fragmentation in high definition. I mean, the more his need for validation grew, the more disconnected his expression became from the authentic truth that made his early work so powerful. We're watching someone chase the high of public reaction at a cost of their spiritual integrity. Think about moments in your own life when you've expressed something purely for validation rather than truth. Remember how that made you feel. That empty feeling after getting the likes or comments you wanted. That's your spirit telling you that validation is a poor substitute for authentic expression. The controversy escalation. The second truth about validation or the validation trap is that it creates a dangerous pattern where you need increasingly shocking statements or behaviors to maintain the same validation. So Kanye's evolution from speaking uncomfortable truths to making increasingly controversial statements shows what happens when visibility becomes more important than authentic expression. Early in his career, he gained attention for speaking genuine truths that others wouldn't say. But his as his addiction for validation grew, we've watched him make increasingly extreme statements that seem just designed specifically to generate maximum reaction. This pattern isn't unique to Kanye. It's how validation addiction works for all of us. When you start chasing public reaction, you quickly discover that measured, nuanced truth really gets as much attention as controversial or extreme positions. And this creates what we call a spiral where you need to be increasingly shocking to maintain the same level of validation. Think about your own relationships with visibility for a second. Have you noticed how your most thoughtful posts often get less engagement than something provocative or controversial? Have you ever felt tempted to just exaggerate your position just to get more reaction? Have you seen how social media platforms actually reward the most reaction generating content rather than the most truthful? Ask yourself honestly, where have I been tempted to just amplify controversy just to increase visibility? Where have I chosen provocation over nuance because I knew it would get more reaction? The spiritual significance of this pattern is profound because when validation becomes your primary goal, truth becomes increasingly negotiable. So this explains why people who start by speaking authentic truth often end up making increasingly indefensible statements. They're no longer orientated towards truth, but towards reaction. Have you noticed how this plays out in your own expression? Maybe you've exaggerated a story just to get a bigger reaction. Maybe you've taken a more extreme position than you actually hold because you knew it would get more engagement. Maybe you've posted something designed specifically to provoke rather than communicate. Kanye's trajectory from truth teller to controversy generator shows what happens when this pattern plays out over years. The need for validation becomes so strong that generating reaction becomes more important than maintaining integrity with your authentic truth. The pattern might be opening in your own expression in ways you haven't fully recognized. The more you orient towards validation, the more you'll find yourself tempted to manufacture controversy rather than express genuine truth. The return to self reference. So, the third truth about the validation trap is that genuine freedom only comes when you release your dependence on external approval and return to self referential authenticity. One of the most powerful aspects of Kanye's complex journey is that despite his validation addiction, he's had moments of profound artistic authenticity where he created from internal guidance rather than anticipated reception. So albums like 808s and Heartbreak initially received mixed reviews precisely because they didn't follow formulas designed for maximum approval. Yet they ultimately proved deeply influential because of their authenticity. These moments reveal what spiritual traditions call the return to self reference, which is the capacity to orient by internal compass rather than external reaction. It's those rare moments when someone breaks free from validation addiction and creates from authentic truth, regardless of anticipated reception. So just think about your own relationship with self referential authenticity. When was the last time you expressed something solely because it felt true with zero consideration on how it might be received? When have you created something that came purely from your authentic voice rather than calculation for approval? Ask yourself, what might become possible in my creative expression if I orientated entirely by internal authenticity rather than anticipated validation? What truth might I express if I completely release my concern with how it would be received? The spiritual significance of this orientation is profound. When you create from self-reference rather than validation seeking, you access what wisdom traditions call original mind, expression that emerges from your authentic essence rather than calculation for effect. Have you noticed how your most meaningful expressions have often been those where you were least concerned with reception? This observation, it reveals a counterintuitive truth. The less you focus on validation, the more likely your expression will resonate at a deeper level with others seeking authentic truth. Kanye's moments of artistic authenticity despite public criticism demonstrate what's possible, I should say, when someone temporarily breaks free from validation addiction. His most influential work has often been created when he followed internal guidance rather than external expectation. And the same possibility exists in your own expression. When you release your attachment to how your truth is received, you create space for expression that comes from your authentic essence rather than performance for effect. Now let's transform this awareness into your power. Understanding the validation trap isn't about beating yourself up, okay? It's about liberation. When you recognize these patterns, you gain the ability to transform your approach to self expression from validation seeking to authentic creation. And the first practice, or first, the practice validation awareness. So the next time you're about to share something, whether on social media, in conversation, or through creative work, pause and ask yourself, am I expressing this from internal validation or authentic communication? Imagine moving through your day with this new perspective. Each expression becomes a conscious choice between performing for validation or communicating from authenticity. The urge to seek approval doesn't disappear. You just gain new sovereignty in how you respond to it. And when you find yourself checking repeatedly for responses after sharing something, gently notice this validation seeking behavior. And instead of judging yourself, simply ask, what am I hoping these responses will provide that I'm not giving myself? This one question reveals how validation seeking often masks a deeper need for self validation. Also, second, transform your expression from validation orientated to authenticity centered with these three step process. So connect with your authentic motivation before expressing. So ask yourself, what am I truly wanting to communicate here? Rather than how will this be received? This simple shift in focus can completely transform what and how you share. Also notice that when you're tempted to exaggerate or provoke for increased visibility, when you feel this urge, ask yourself, is this amplification authentic to my genuine perspective? Or am I manufacturing controversy for attention? Also, practice creating from internal guidance rather than anticipated reception. So, experiment with expressing something solely because it feels authentic, with zero consideration on how it might be received. Try this practice with your next social media post or creative expression. How does it feel to create from authenticity rather than validation seeking? Third, develop what I call validation independence, which is the capacity to acknowledge external feedback without being defined by it. This balanced approach, it doesn't require you to become a hermit or ignore audience completely. It simply means you no longer depend on external validation for your sense of worth or the value of your expression. When validation seeking emerges or urge, when validation seeking urges arise, practice saying to yourself, I acknowledge this desire for external approval, but I choose to orient by internal authenticity instead, and notice how this perspective transforms expression from validation dependent to authentically free. Let me share what's possible when you break free from the validation trap. Imagine if you approached your self expression without that desperate need for likes, comments, and approval. This awareness wouldn't make you disconnect from others, but it would transform your connections from performance based interactions to authentic exchanges, a shift that would deepen rather than diminish your impact. The same transformation awaits in your creative expression. When validation no longer dictates your creativity, you gain the freedom to create from authentic inspiration rather than calculated performance. You can engage with audience without being controlled by their reactions. And this doesn't mean that you never consider reception. It just means you integrate that consideration without sacrificing your authentic voice. Your self referential authenticity creates the perfect conditions for meaningful impact. When you recognize this truth, validation seeking transforms from a perceived necessity into a recognized limitation. And this understanding, again, doesn't diminish the value of connection. It transforms its purpose from validation seeking to authentic communication. The most influential creators aren't those desperately seeking approval. They're those expressing authentic truth, regardless of anticipated reaction or reception, I should say. And this distinction really explains why some work resonates deeply while validation orientated that creation often feels empty despite its popularity. So just think about how this might transform your social media presence. When validation seeking no longer drives your sharing, you gain the freedom to express from authentic presence rather than performance. You can engage with platforms without being controlled by their metrics. This doesn't mean you never pay attention to response. Again, it means you maintain your authentic voice regardless of external validation. And the same transformation waits in your everyday conversations as well. When you release the need to shape your words for maximum approval, you reclaim the energy previously lost to performance and self-editing. This week, I challenge you to notice three situations where validation seeking influences your expression and practice choosing authenticity instead. Notice how this exploration doesn't diminish your connections, but enhances their depth and authenticity. And remember that what you once saw as the need for external validation becomes your opportunity for expression, authentic expression. What once triggered performance becomes your invitation for genuine communication. What once seemed like the requirement for visibility becomes your pathway to meaningful impact. The freedom was never about being validated by everyone. It was always in expressing your authentic truth, regardless of reception. As always, stay beautiful, stay connected, and stay conscious in the field.